I was, I think, angry at myself and hard on myself because it's your body, you should be able to control it. And whenever you can't, you kind of feel that your mind and your body are very different things and they're not connected, because the things you want to do, your body won't let you do them. And I think that was such a difficult realization, was that I was completely out of control and there was nothing anybody could do about it.
Welcome to The Consult Room, the podcast where we explore the evolving world of modern pet care. I'm Dr Paul Manktelow, a UK veterinary surgeon with a deep passion for pet health and welfare. In each episode, I'll be exploring key issues, challenging perspectives, and offering expert insight and practical advice. Because ultimately, my mission is to improve the lives of pets and the people who love them. So today's episode is one that I'm really excited to record. It's a story of dreams nearly lost and the incredible power of support dogs to give someone their life back. My guest is Jade, a vet student living with a condition called POTS, Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia syndrome. And in Jade's case, this causes sudden, unpredictable drops in blood pressure and loss of consciousness, often without warning. At one point, Jade was collapsing multiple times a week, injuring herself regularly, and eventually, halfway through vet school, was forced to leave and give up on her lifelong dream of becoming a vet. Now, that could have been the end of the story, but everything changed when she was matched with Jules, an alert assistance dog trained by medical detection dogs. Jules can sense when an episode is coming and alerts Jade minutes before it happens, giving her just enough time to get somewhere safe. Now, since Jules moved in, Jade hasn't had a single injury or hospital visit. She's back at vet school and building the life she thought she'd lost. This is a conversation about adversity, independence, and the quiet power of an incredible dog. Jade, welcome to the consult room.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I was going to ask you if Jules is with us today, but I've just seen his face come into camera and give you a little lick.
Yeah, he's always here, yeah.
So, Jade, can we start at the beginning? Now, for people that aren't familiar with POTS, can you describe what it is and how it affects you day to day?
Yeah, so as you said, it stands for Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia syndrome, and it very basically means that your heart rate increases rapidly and your blood pressure drops. And for me, it happens so quickly that I don't get any warning at all. So I lose consciousness without any warning, which would have caused a lot of injuries before Jules. It's quite complicated in that it's a neurological condition that presents as a cardiovascular condition. So it's a condition of a dysfunction in your autonomic nervous system. So your heart rate doesn't regulate as it should, especially when you're standing. Not enough blood gets to your head. It means your heart beats faster, but in doing that, the brain and the rest of your tissues don't get enough blood properly and enough oxygen, which causes that loss of consciousness. So it can be treated with medication, but for whatever reason, mine's resistant to medication. We tried everything. A lot of them I couldn't have because it decreases both your heart rate and blood pressure, and we don't really need my blood pressure to be any lower, so we couldn't do that. And then others we tried, I reacted to, so we were left with two, and those are at the highest doses and still don't make any significant difference, unfortunately. So medicine had done everything it could do, so that's whenever we kind of passed it on to a dog, hopefully to have helped.
So going back to I think I read that you were diagnosed in your early teens. So did you have signs of this condition before then? Because I read somewhere that this condition can often be misdiagnosed or attributed to some other cause.
Yeah, it took me, I think, 7 years to be diagnosed properly. There was a lot of misdiagnoses and missed diagnoses along the way. I probably first started showing signs around the age of 7 and 8 of the other health conditions as well. And then when I was about 11, which was a year before I first fully fainted, I'd, especially in the morning, lose my vision every time I stood up. And I'd sort of stop and stare, but it would go away again. So I kind of thought, well, people say if you stand up too quickly, you can get a head rush. So I kind of brushed it off as that and didn't tell anybody for over a year. And then when it was the summer, a couple of months before my 13th birthday, I think we were watching TV, me and my mum, and I stood up and I remember saying, whoa, whoa, and then fell between the seat the armchair and the sofa, and it was very quick, but as I was coming round I was jerking as well, and my mum was kind of, I think, slightly panicked because it never happened before, but I recovered quickly, and I don't like making a fuss, so I kind of brushed it off as, oh, that loss of vision went a bit too far that time. And we never really talked about it again. I kind of said it was fine, everything's fine. And then a few months later, which was a couple of weeks after my 13th birthday, I was in school and had my first back-to-back episode, and the teachers weren't happy with how I was recovering between these episodes, so they phoned an ambulance, and since then I'd never gone a week without fainting at least a couple of times and losing consciousness.
I mean, you say there you were losing consciousness quite frequently, and I think I read in your story that you suffered quite significant injuries throughout this period. What kind of injuries did you sustain?
It was mostly related to my head, unfortunately. It seemed to be the first thing that hit. So I would have back-to-back concussions, I think, for years at a time, and I didn't even realise how they were affecting me until I got Jules and realised that a lot of these symptoms were concussion related for having so many. And I would also get subluxations of joints, especially when I have another connective tissue disorder. My joints are very hypermobile and unstable, so especially if you were knocking them quite a bit, they were out of place quite a bit, especially my hip and my shoulder. But I got to the point that I'd hit my head so many times that A&E told me that I couldn't have any more CT scans because of the radiation. So the last couple of times I'd had those scans, I had to sign, things that I was taking the risk or whatever, because not having the scan was more risky than any effects radiation might have down the line. And then it got to the point that they said that they would have to keep me for observation and book MRI instead of CT. And then they also said that because it was so dangerous, I might have to consider sheltered accommodation while I was at university, which isn't what I wanted to do. And university had already given me a fall detection bracelet. So even though it couldn't stop the falls, at least whenever it had the impact on the ground, it could ring a call centre, which then rang our university security to come and find me because it had GPS. So it was quite difficult whenever, you were getting ambulances multiple, lots of times, and my mum was getting phone calls from university security or paramedics, any time of the day or night. So I don't know how she kind of coped when she was 500 miles away at home and stuff like that.
I was going to say it must have been really stressful and quite worrying for your mum, all that distance away to, obviously hear this was happening and not being around the corner. But from your perspective, you say in your sort of early childhood, you kind of brushed it off and didn't want to make a fuss. But did you ever feel like this was going to be, really limiting in the choices that you had in life?
Yeah, it definitely did. I think at the start I just assumed it would go away, and I remember this was October when I had those back-to-back episodes, and I remember my teacher said around the start of November, oh, it'll be fine, you'll be fixed by Christmas. And I remember thinking, well, of course I'll be fixed by Christmas, that's over a month away, it's going to go away. That was 11 years ago now, and it didn't go away. And I think whenever I even started university, I just assumed it was a new start. No one knew who I was. They didn't know all the problems that everyone else knew I had at school. And I kind of thought it'll go away and no one will ever know, and I can be the vet. And obviously very quickly you realise that that's not the case, and it's even harder when you are away from home. And it's, there are harder days even now that you kind of think, is it possible? But every single day Jules kind of proves that is more possible, and he's the one that's made more difference than anything else has made in all these years.
We're going to talk quite a bit about Jules in a minute. And obviously, he's probably quite used to being the star of the show, isn't he? But
yeah,
just going back, despite all of this, despite everything that you were going through, you had this really strong ambition to become a vet. Where did that come from?
I think we'd always grown up with lots of different animals. So we've always had at least one dog and a cat at a time. And we've had fish and guinea pigs and even a bearded dragon. And my granddad had a horse, pony and donkey as well. So growing up, we were always around lots of different animals, and I always liked to go to the vet whenever my granddad or aunt or my mum took the animals to the vet, and they had lots of different posters that I used to look at. And one day, probably to get me to stop asking questions, the vet gave me like a big plastic model of a flea, and my mum wasn't as impressed, but I thought this was incredible. And since then I kind of thought, these people are sort of magic in a way, that you take the animals in, that they're unwell, and then you come out and they're so much better within a couple of days. And because even when I was younger, and especially through being unwell, I spent more time with animals than people, and I kind of wanted to give a bit back to them and make a difference to them like they had to me.
And of course, you made it into vet school, which is a huge achievement for anyone, really. But what did that moment feel like for you, knowing what you'd gone through to get to that point?
I think it was a bit surreal, because I don't think me or anybody thought that it could actually happen. Since being unwell, it was my second year of secondary school. I'd never had attendance above 40% in a year, so I had to teach myself a lot. Most of the work was sent home with my sister, and then I would do it at home, because the one thing you can do if you're sat on a sofa is do work, and I'd no control over anything else. So I thought I might as well have a little bit of control over the work, especially whenever I had the goal to get there. So it was incredible when I got that email that I'd been accepted into vet school, because all those, hours and hours spent working, even in hospital, whenever doctors had told me to stop working, all of a sudden, it was reality again. And it was the best feeling ever, and kind of proved that I could do it whenever people had told me I couldn't.
And which university are you at, by the way?
I'm at University of Surrey.
What was that application process like? Because obviously they would have, been made aware of your condition. Were they good at sort of working out with you how to navigate that in terms of reasonable adjustments or whatever they needed to do to support you?
Yeah, whenever I first applied, I think it was mentioned in the application, but I don't know how much they look at that rather than your interviews and stuff. And then in the summer before I started, I was contacted by the university's Disability and Neurodiversity Centre and advisors. So they were able to put some plans in place, but I think we quickly realised that what you get told and what's on paper doesn't always translate into real life. So we did have things in place, and they were very good at listening. It was just very difficult to manage before Jules.
Yeah, and obviously Jules wasn't with you at the start of your university placement. And in, I think, 2022, wasn't it, halfway through your second year, you had to leave vet school of your condition. And what was happening with your health at that time? And I guess, what did it feel like to let go of something that you'd worked so hard for?
We, coming up to the Christmas of first year, we were kind of even then talking about, is it possible that you can take a year out? But at that time we didn't know, a year out, I'd already had it 9 years or so. I wasn't going to think a year was going to magically make it go away. We decided not to, but that was around the time then I'd heard of medical detection dogs. But I decided to keep going, because I knew the application process was a long one, especially, during COVID, it had delayed things a little bit. And it was just getting worse and worse, I think, by the month. And I think family at home knew that I wasn't doing very well, but also he didn't really want to tell anybody that, because I didn't want anyone else to think that I couldn't do it. So a lot of the things I kind of just dealt with without people knowing. But it got to the point that I was signed off all placements because it wasn't safe. I couldn't work with large animals or scalpels or chemicals, and you need to do these practicals to pass the semester, to pass the year. So I couldn't go any further without that. And it got to February 2022, and we were starting to have discussions of, how I'm going to keep going forward. It just wasn't going to work. And then I just had a really bad episode in the vet school that needed another ambulance. And I think on the spot, then I decided, that's it, I'm leaving. And I rang my mum after, and I spoke to a friend and was like, I think I've decided I'm leaving next week. And it was quite sudden whenever it did happen, but I don't think it was a surprise to anybody. And I think the university were probably quite glad I finally made that decision as well, because it just wasn't safe for me to be there at that time.
You strike me as the sort of person, Jade, you referenced a few times that you just you're quite determined and you just got to get on with things. So that must have been absolutely devastating for you to get to that point where you realised that it wasn't tenable.
Yeah, I think I've always been someone that doesn't like to make a fuss, and whatever's easier for anybody else is fine by me, and I'll just kind of get by, and I don't want people to worry and things like that. So whenever I decided that I would go, that was the biggest decision ever, and really upsetting, because all through school the reason I'd got the grades to get in was because I wanted to be a vet, and all of a sudden I was deciding myself sort of that I couldn't be that, and that was really difficult, and admitting to yourself that maybe people were right all along. And in the back of my head, I had this application process of medical detection dogs, but we weren't sure if that would actually happen, if we could find a dog to be able to do this. So I was leaving with the hope of coming back, but with no certainty at all, which was really scary and difficult whenever you didn't have any distraction, because I think I used work all throughout school and vet school to get through any health things, because I don't deal with them very well. So I just would prefer to deny and distract as my sort of method. And if you're not in vet school and you don't have anything to work towards, that was, I think, the most difficult part, because I didn't know what I was going to do whenever my whole life I said I was going to be a vet, especially after GCS.
And what did you do in that time? You must have been, obviously devastated, but were you angry as well at this condition that had sort of, ruined your dreams?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was the hardest 2 years that I think I've ever had. Well, it was about a year and a half until I got Jules, and I came home, and my mum is a VP at a school, so she works an hour away, so she worked 7 to 7. So I was by myself all day with just the animals, really, and I wouldn't leave the house for months at a time. I hadn't been in shops in years and years. The only people I'd really see are family, because university friends are in England, and anybody at school are also all over the country at different universities. So I even had to sort of crawl around the house when my mum wasn't here, because we didn't have the full detection bracelet thing that could ring security and things like that. So it was such a difficult 2 years, and I think I definitely was angry. I think I was angry at maybe not being diagnosed sooner, because you don't know what would have happened if it was diagnosed sooner, if medication would have helped. I was, I think, angry at myself and hard on myself, because it's your body, you should be able to control it. And whenever you can't, you kind of feel that your mind and your body are very different things, and they're not connected, because the things you want to do, your body won't let you do them. And I think that was such a difficult realization, was that I was completely out of control and there was nothing anybody could do about it. And I think during that time as well, I'd seen more cardiologists, I'd seen, and they were telling me again and again there was nothing more that we could do. And I think that's what made me angry, because I couldn't understand why some things worked for some people and weren't working for me as well.
And it sounds like this was a really long period of social isolation, and it must have affected your mental health in that time as well.
I think it did. I think during school time as well, I was sort of part-time most of the time. For the first good while, I would have done every other day for 2 hours. So I was almost after school kind of used to not seeing that many people. But it definitely did have an impact long term, because you find it more difficult to socialise with people then. And, you'd go all day, hours and hours, not speaking to anybody except your pets. You sometimes do think you're going a little bit insane whenever you're just left with you and yourself, and not having people close by, which I think that was the difficult thing. Whenever you'd family, which was incredible, but you'd nobody outside that very small circle.
But getting matched with Jules was a real turning point for you. Can you tell me about that moment when you found out that you were actually getting a medical alert assistance dog?
Yeah, we found out, was it maybe a year before I met Jules, that I was definitely eligible for a dog, but we just weren't sure if we could find a dog that would be able to do everything that we need to in vet school with all the different animals and labs and stuff. So then whenever I found out that I was going to meet some dogs, that was really exciting, but also I didn't want to get my hopes up, because everything else that I'd got my hopes up for, like different treatment options, hadn't worked. So I was almost a bit, I'm not going to say that it's happening until he actually moves in. So whenever we got to meet him, it was 2 years ago the other day, actually, on the 21st of June. He was the first dog I met, and I said to my mum that I didn't believe at love and first sight until I saw Jules come in. He's such a character. I said the one thing I asked for was a dog that had personality, and he had that in bucket loads. He just bounded into the room, but also what struck me is that there was lots of people in the room, and he sort of went round to each person to greet them as if he didn't want to leave anybody out. But he kept coming back to me for extra pets and stuff, which was lovely whenever he knew the trainers so well. So I spent quite a while with him that day, and he came over for a home visit a couple of months later. And it was at the home visit, it was only supposed to be that, a home visit, but then our trainer, when they were flying back at the airport, because I think I was a bit upset that I thought, I might not see this dog ever again, and I'd started to fall in love with him, she kind of said, well, off the record, if scent training goes well, he's yours and he'll move in 8 weeks. And I think it was supposed to make me not cry, and I think it made me cry a bit more, because I was just so relieved that this could be the answer to a close to normal life as possible.
What sort of training do dogs like Jules go through? And did you do any of that training together?
So Jules, whenever he was picked, he moved in with socialisers then when he was a couple of months old, and socialisers of MDD are incredible. They take on the role of the main training, so everywhere they go, the dog goes, and they go to training sessions at the centre. So that's from a couple of months old, and they'll do that until they've different assessments they have to meet along the way, and their final assessments maybe around 18 months to 2 years old. So they'll do that, and then it's when they've passed their final assessment, they'll start to meet their clients, the potential clients, and it's only after they are definitely going to move in with them and they've done the homestays and stuff that they then start the scent training to that particular person. And it's the most important part, but takes the quickest, which is crazy to think that the job that they have is what they're trained the least amount of time to do, and it's incredible how quickly they can pick it up. So it would be the instructors that do that, and while they do that, they'll also be doing the client specific training, so maybe retrieving things or getting medical bags or water bottles and things like that. So all the training that MDD do are just incredible. I don't know how they do it.
I've actually been to their facility.
Oh, have you?
And and it is phenomenal just how amazing the dogs are, but also the trainers.
Yeah.
But I think I read that since you've had Jules, you haven't had a single injury or hospital admission. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, which is amazing to think.
That must be sort of amazing to have that reliability after years of that uncertainty.
Yeah. I was surprised how quickly I relied that he could be that accurate. I went from thinking, I knew the dogs could do it, I just wasn't sure if they'd be able to do it all the time, and especially when they first move in, I wasn't sure how quickly they'd pick it up. But he picked it up so quickly, and he's even developed this second alert that is kind of specific to him. I call it a horse puff because it doesn't sound like anything else I've ever heard a dog do. It's like a silent bark, but it sounds like whenever a horse blows out their lips. So he does that whenever he thinks that it's going to come on quicker, if it's going to be worse, which isn't something they're taught. He just naturally did this about 2 weeks after he moved in. And I think that just blew my mind, because I remember saying to my trainer, I sent her a video And I said, he's doing this really strange thing and I don't know what he's doing. And it's not every episode, it's only some of them. And then whenever we went back to look at it and we were collecting data and stuff, we realised that it's basically getting the floor as quickly as possible kind of alert. And I've no idea how he knows that, because when he does it, I feel nothing yet. So I don't know how he can predict what it's going to be before I feel anything at all.
You say the scent training. What is he actually detecting before you have one of your episodes? Like physiologically, I might be putting your veterinary training to test now because I presume you've done all your anatomy and physiology.
And we're not fully sure what it is that the POTS dogs detect. We know that, the blood sugar dogs obviously detect the drop in sugars or the rise in sugars. The POTS, we think it comes more from the sweat on your body. So I think it's just different chemicals that are given off whenever your body's sort of that in acute crisis mode before you're going to collapse. But I think it is probably more the heart rate than the blood pressure that they can smell, or just a combination of both. Which I always find it incredible how they can first of all smell it, but also smell it over anything else. So it must be quite unique. And some of the POTS dogs alert other people, but a lot of them stick to their main person. So maybe each person has that individual scent, which, it's amazing to think that these dogs are trained specifically to you, like a little personal sniffer dog, really, just for you.
And it's amazing what you said there, that he's actually not only doing what he's trained to do, but he's found a way of looking, sort of almost detecting something that we didn't expect him to, like those more extreme versions of your episodes, and he can communicate that differently. That's something that he's just done himself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredible. I've always been told he's a bit of an overachiever and a bit of a teacher's pet, but we weren't quite sure, that he could. Well, we didn't think he would do it because we didn't think it was possible. I didn't think that the dogs could detect different severity of episodes, so it wasn't something I was even looking for or thinking to even train for. But it's so useful because, as I said before, I don't like making a fuss, so if I can, I try and sit down before I lie down, especially if it's in public or a shop or outside or something. I think if you sit down, it's not as obvious to people that there's someone lying on a floor with a dog with a big bright jacket. But with this second alert, then it means that he makes sure I'm safe, because otherwise I just sit and then still faint and have an injury. Whereas he is still preventing that injury, and he doesn't just alert and be like, okay, do with that what you will, my job's done, I've alerted for the first time. He'll continue to alert until he knows I'm safe, which is incredible because they're trained like it's a game, because they don't want them to be afraid of it. So all the dogs get really excited to alert, which makes people laugh because it's quite funny that they're almost celebrating that you're about to become very unwell. And Jules's tail even goes in a big windmill and stuff because he's so excited. But yet they take it so seriously as well, as being so excited to do it. And he gets this really serious face. And our instructor, whenever we were doing those 6 months of training before accreditation, she used to always say, oh, he's got his really serious face on, move quicker, just take him seriously. So I don't know how they do it. And the thing is, they don't even know they do it, which is even more incredible. They just think they're doing a game, getting a treat and getting all this praise, but they don't realise how life-saving they are.
I mean, we sometimes forget, don't we, that assistance dogs they're not just robots, they're still dogs. And you said you wanted a dog with personality, so I'd really like to get a sense of who is Jules, the dog, when he's, I guess outside of work. I'm not sure he's ever outside of work, but what kind of personality does he have?
And I think that's what I always want people to know the most, is that the dogs are still dogs and they have that time to be dogs, which is so important because they do such an amazing job that I want to give him the best life possible outside of work. So they don't work as often as people think. They're in their jacket much less than they're out of jacket. And even though Jules alerts out of jacket, he still is a dog. And it always surprises people when I tell him he's a really high energy dog, because whenever they see him working, he's so calm, and usually in the vet school he's asleep. So you don't really see that high energy dog that he is, but he's so goofy, he's so funny. He's quite clumsy as well, and our trainer always says that he's actually quite well matched to me because our personality with some things are very similar. We both don't like shopping, so whenever our family drag us around the shops, we've even got the both similar expression and even both drag our feet around the shops. Whenever he gets tired or he doesn't want to be in a shop, he'll start dragging his feet, and I'm like, I feel the same, Jules, but I have to keep going. And he's just so funny, and I think he makes even the really difficult days that lot better, because he'll do something to make you laugh anytime. And like I said, he's really he's silly, and sometimes I think, how can he be so clever and yet so silly at the same time? He trips over his own feet. Sometimes whenever I'm in the vet school and I get a mat, Jules will take the mat before I do. It's always like, I get on first, you just sit on the floor. Or whenever he tries to get off the mat, he'll even struggle in his back to get up. He's so funny, and he makes so many people laugh or smile, which is nice as well, because you see people in the vet school maybe looking a bit stressed, and then they see Jules walk through and their face kind of lights up a little bit. So it's really sweet that he not only makes me smile, but a lot of other people as well.
I'm going to say, your face absolutely lights up when you're talking about him, and it's really lovely to see. Where do you think you'd be right now if you hadn't been matched with him?
I think life would be a lot different, and I think a lot darker and more uncertain. I always say I don't know what I'd do without him, and I genuinely don't know what I'd do without him. The other week I had a hospital procedure that he couldn't go to because we needed a sterile environment, and I needed sedation, so he couldn't be with me. And that time, because I didn't have him and a friend very kindly took him for me, I had a POTS episode without warning and hit my head again. So that was the first time in nearly 2 years since I had him that I've had an injury. And I think it reminded me more than ever how important he is and how much I rely on him. And even coming round from episodes, especially bad ones, I don't see double, but I see 1.5. And I don't fully understand what people are saying. I can hear them, but it's like they're not talking English to me for the first couple of... So I don't always recognise people, which can be quite scary. But the one thing I do recognise is Jules every time.
Wow.
So the first thing I always do when I come round is look for him, which is usually licking my face. So it's quite easy to find him, or look for his paw. And that's the last thing I do before I lose consciousness. And the first thing I do when I wake up is pet his paw. So when he wasn't there, I realised actually how scary it was coming round from episodes without him, and how much you don't take him for granted, but you just think, he's always going to be there. And the fact that he wasn't there just that one time is, crazy to think what could happen without him again. And I think I forgot actually how scary it was without him, because you rely so much on him and he's there all the time.
So you're back at vet school now.
Yeah.
What did it feel like walking through the door for the first time with Jules by your side?
It was a bit surreal to start with. It felt like we'd never left, but at the same time so much had changed. And I think I changed a lot as well as a person. And it was quite good that I was due to start back in February, but Jules matched with me in September time. So we had 6 months of training in the vet school before we could go back, which was really useful. So I could go back. The first time was with our trainer, Lauren, and she's been incredible the whole way through, but she always keeps me calm and I think distracts me from other stressful things. We always just kind of talk to ourselves and mess about rather than do training, to be honest. And she was incredible and had us in... I think we did the first settle in the main vet school, and at that time I don't think many lectures had been told, but definitely no students. So it was a bit... She loved people watching when everyone had seen the dog, and they're like, oh my goodness, there's a dog. And you'd think in vet school it wouldn't be that rare to see a dog, but we don't really see that many dogs unless it's for teaching and handling and stuff. So it was incredible to have him go back in, knowing that I was more in control than when I left. And when we did that settle, it was actually more or less the exact same place that I decided to leave. So it was a bit full circle that I'd left in that spot, made up my mind and came back, and Jules was sitting in that spot again, and with, much more hope than ever before that we could do it again.
And I mean, dogs obviously provide us with so much sort of connection, not just with the dog, but with other people as well, because people want to come and say hello to your dog, and then they speak to you. How did you find that? Did you find that a positive thing? Because I know sometimes, especially people being, socially isolated as such, it can be a little bit overwhelming. How did you find that? Because obviously everybody would have wanted to come and speak to you, wouldn't they?
In the vet school, it wasn't too bad because I knew most of the people, and it was nice to see them again. And it wasn't that awkward of, oh, you're back. If all of a sudden I had a reason, to talk to them, was a dog. He's a great conversation starter, which is good. But like you say, I didn't have that much connection with people, and all of a sudden you're a bit of a magnet to people. And that's actually kind of what put me off applying for a couple of months before I did, because I wasn't sure if I wanted quite literally a walking billboard that there was something wrong with you. Whereas before, I wanted to blend into the background. Even my closest friends at uni didn't know unless it was a couple of months later or had actually seen an episode. I just didn't tell anybody unless it was obviously staff that needed to know. Very few people knew. So obviously with Jules, everybody knew that there was something, and same as when you go into a shop, and especially whenever standing still can be a trigger of mine. You've all of a sudden got people very interested in shops to know what he does until he alerts, and then you very quickly have to go somewhere else because you've just told them that he alerts to when you can lose consciousness, and all of a sudden they're like, well, we don't want to deal with this, so they kind of leave you with maybe a preventable episode. But I always do love talking about Jules. He's the easiest thing. Jules and veterinary are the easiest things I can talk about, and I love them so much I could probably talk all day about them. So it's great that no matter where you go, you're kind of always spreading more information about medical detection dogs and how incredible these dogs are. And even if people sometimes reduce to tears when you tell them what he does, which is amazing. We've had people say that they'll donate regularly and stuff like that, which I'm always happy to talk to people if it means that medical detection dogs get the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic charity. And as I say, I've seen firsthand the work that they do, and it is really, really incredible how life-changing it is and how they're really at the forefront of science in so many different ways. So when you look ahead, what kind of vet do you want to be? And does your condition, is it going to influence the path you take? Have you thought about that beyond graduation?
I think there's still a lot of hoops to jump through and barriers in the way, but I think with each clinical placement I do, it proves that it is possible with adjustments. Whenever you first approach a placement, whenever you're in veterinary, you have to do, as you know, the clinical placements in 26 weeks or whatever in practices. The practices, when you tell them you have a dog, are initially a bit, well, we can't support that. I don't think that's going to work. But when you break it down and you tell them how good Jules is with the different species and how, he just sits in his bed unless you need him to alert, a lot of people forget he's actually there. Then they'll say, okay, we'll give it a go. And within the first couple of hours, they're telling you, oh, actually, this does work. We didn't think it would work, but it does. So it does open up that I could be a small animal vet, and I quite like the idea of, a small animal with an exotic caseload. But over the years, I really have loved pathology as well, especially clinical pathology. And that would definitely work quite well with the condition. I'd quite happily look down microscopes every day and write up reports and stuff. Jules wouldn't find it just as exciting as the clinics. He loves being in clinics. He's quite a nosy dog as well. So he loves seeing all these different things and going to farms and yards and stables and everything. So he's happy to do whatever he wants. And as long as he's happy, I'm happy to shape my career around him as well, because it's not just about me, it's about what Jules is happy with as well, and I always put him first. So yeah, it's good to see that all the training that was done and all the vet school work translates into the actual vet world, because we weren't sure if it would, because as much as he's good in our labs and stuff, there was no training that was going to prepare him for the clinical placements until we went, and he was just incredible from the second he stepped his foot in.
I think, from our conversation today, Jade, it feels like there are, huge amount of barriers and adversity, but feels like you're breaking through them quite well. And I feel like, the profession needs more people like you to open up doors and to get people to realise that things are possible. So, thank you for that. I think it's inspiring for
That's
people.
kind.
So, Jade, thank you for sharing your story so openly. And please give Jules a big fuss from me. I'm sure I don't have to ask you to do that. But I've got one last question now. I ask this to all my guests. Is there a person or a pet that's inspired you? I mean, obviously, there's probably one sitting right next to you there, but is there anybody or any animal that's really inspired you in your journey? Who are they, and what impact have they had on you?
I think our other pet dog, Oscar, definitely had a huge impact. I got him a couple of months to a year after I first became unwell, because it was quite an upsetting time, and we had an older dog at the time that he was very, very old, and we just thought if we get a new puppy, it would make the transition easier whenever our other dog did pass, as we had him for 18 years, and it meant that I had another little companion to be with me whenever I wasn't in school. So he was just such a cute little fluffy puppy. He's still so cute, and he still acts like a puppy when he's 10 now. And he's inspired me a lot because he just gets on with things. He's always been there through the really difficult times, and it's animals like him that I wanted to give back and make a difference to them. And then I didn't realise that in my journey of wanting to make a difference to animals, that I'd find an animal that's made more difference in my life than I could ever imagine in Jules, which was so nice to have that experience whenever I didn't expect it at all.
And how has Oscar been with Jules coming in with? Obviously, Jules has got a very specific role, hasn't he, supporting you? But Oscar, it sounds like, has as well. Do they get on? Are they friends?
Yeah, we were surprised how well actually Oscar settled in with Jules when he came home for our first Christmas. Oscar's quite a timid dog. He doesn't overly like other dogs unless he's used to them. But he seemed to trust Jules really quickly, which is funny because Jules is about 3 times the size, so we thought he'd be quite afraid of him. But they just, they're sitting on the sofa together. They kind of coexist. Oscar's a lot less energetic than Jules, but they get on really well, and it's quite sweet that they do curl up together. And Oscar's not in any way jealous either, which was a relief to me because he was sort of my shadow, and obviously Jules goes everywhere with me now, but Oscar's still there anytime I'm at home and stuff like that, and we do as much together as possible whenever I am home from university.
No. Jade, your stories, it's a really powerful reminder of how animals, support us, and they don't just keep us safe, but they can really restore independence, confidence, and purpose. And I know a lot of people that listen to this will take real strength from what you've shared today. So thank you for coming on the consult room. Thanks
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You'll find all the relevant links to this conversation in the show notes. If you enjoyed it, please follow us and leave a review. It really helps other people discover the podcast. For more insights on topics like this, you can connect with me on social media at Dr Paul the Vet, or check out my website, theconsultroom.co.uk.